You're listening to Eat the Principles with Jem Kolber.
Firstly, I just want to do an acknowledgement of country. So I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians on the land that I'm currently on in Melbourne, Victoria, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. And I also just want to acknowledge First Nations people as the first teachers, speakers and leaders in this country. Welcome everyone to Eat the Principles. Just to introduce myself, I'm Jem Kolber. I'm an experienced Victorian secondary school teacher and leader, and I think I might also want to be a principal. And as a way of getting principals, mainly women, some men, to mentor me and develop me, I've created this podcast as a way of spending time with them. They are leaders that I admire, and I want to unpack what it is exactly that makes them good leaders. And I intend on consuming these strengths and qualities and absorbing them into my own being to become the ultimate principal. And of course, share what I've learned with other aspiring leaders. And today I'm chatting with Michelle Crofts. So we have known each other for a long time because we worked in the same school a million years ago, which was an inner city public secondary school in Melbourne. I was a baby teacher. You were an assistant principal at the time. And when I came up with this idea of interviewing mentors who mean a lot to me, I really couldn't imagine doing the first one with anyone else other than you, because you were so integral to me and my development at that time in my career. So thank you for being my very first principal to be interviewed for my podcast. Welcome.
And that's very sweet. Thank you.
So just as a way of introducing yourself to everyone, I would like for you to finish these sentences that I'm going to throw at you. Are you ready? I'm a principal at
Matthew Flinders Girls Secondary College in Geelong.
I've been a principal for
11 years. It's a long time, isn't it?
Prior to that, I was
the Director of Teaching and Learning at another school in Geelong. And before that, I was the assistant principal at that inner city school that we talked about. You just mentioned before.
I'm a principal because
I love my school and my staff, I suppose. That's why I'm a principal, and my leadership team. And at Matthew Flinders, I get to work with this team of people who shape and influence the culture of the school and the lives of young women, actually. And we try and create a school that allows young women to thrive. So that's a pretty special position to be in as a woman leader and as a woman in our society. And so that's why I'm a principal at that school.
Lovely. Last sentence to finish. One book that was pivotal to my journey as a principal is...
This was really hard because there are many books as a principal that you delve into and you need to read and take snippets from or question your own leadership from, and that become pertinent in terms of education. And what you need to read, I reckon, depends on the culture of your school and your own leadership journey. But right at the beginning of my leadership journey, I had the really good fortune of being in the Eleanor Davis Women in Leadership program. And that was sort of like the VAPA program now. It's probably the precursor for the VAPA because the people who ran it now run VAPA or went. And I shadowed a principal. Part of that program was to look at your leadership and all that sort of stuff. But it was actually a shadowing of a guy called Steve Buton, who was the principal at Werribee Secondary College and had been for many, many years and was very established and talented principal. And he basically, on my first day there, he basically gave me 5 books to read that had nothing to do with education. And I was shocked by that because I thought, why aren't you giving me education books? Well, I'd read all the bloody education books that were around at that time anyway, so he couldn't have, I thought it was a bit, give me something I haven't read. And he did, actually. And so there was a book called Good to Great, which I haven't read it again since then. But there were a few things that's the one, that stood out for me in that book that I needed to grip onto, and from the other 5 books that he gave me at the time. So, and those things, that book got me to think about my leadership in and the other books that I read, the other 4, gave me an opportunity to really, really reflect on what it is that I bring as a leader to a school and what I can do better and what I need to celebrate, really. What I need to celebrate was what I got out of it.
Mm. And ever since you mentioned good to great to me when we first made contact about doing this interview, is I've actually, me and Steve, my husband, who was a teacher and now he's at Melbourne Uni, you know, we both are noticing lots of people are mentioning this as, you know, a good kind of leadership development book. Yeah, you know, people who are presenting or, you know, things that he does at Melbourne Uni or podcasts that we listen to. So this seems to be like quite a big bestseller, I suppose, when it comes to leadership. So even though it's not really specific to schools, it's still kind of a lot of concepts can still apply. So did you want to talk about like maybe like one of the main ideas or concepts that you remember when you read this book and thought, oh yes, I'm going to hold on to that and I'm going to make sure, you know, it becomes a part of my leadership development and journey?
Okay, I have 3, but do you want me to just focus on one?
Yeah.
Just one?
No, go all 3. That's fine. That's great. Yeah.
All right. Okay. So the 3 key things were to find what you stand for in a school. So what are you as a school? What do you do and what do you not do? And so that was really easy at Matthew Flinders because we're an all-girls school and the only all-girls state school in Geelong. So that was really easy. And you'll remember, I don't know if you remember that state school in Melbourne, the inner city school. I think I was talking at that stage. I mentioned we need to become a media school because we're really good at media. We are excelling at media. And that came from this experience. That. Yep. And so, so it's been pretty easy, but it's interesting being an all-girls school. People try and look for more things that you can do. And I think over my time as a principal, I've just got to the point where we're just celebrating that we're an all-girls school and that girls can thrive in our context without any of the other challenges or with minimising the challenges with a co-ed context. And it's actually and that's what we now market because schools market, and that's what I celebrate all the time. So that was one. The second thing, which was really important, and I used, like, when I first got the job at Matthew Flinders, there's this concept, and a lot of people will have heard of it, as having the right people on the bus going in the right direction at the right time. So I drew actually a bus, and I had seats on this bus, and I put people in the seats according to where they were positioned on the bus in the school, in terms of power, in terms of jobs or in responsibilities. Who were the drivers of change? Who were the blockers? Who was just happy sitting on the bus going in the direction and really didn't give a damn where it was going but just wanted to go for the ride? Who problem solved the issues when the bus broke down? And who needed to get off the bus? And who was the bus to keep everyone happy? You know, who was the presenter that walked up and down the bus that reminded everybody of all the good things that they were going to be seeing and doing? So it was, I sort of looked at what I had, and then that book was really good because it made me look at what I had and I could see what I needed and who I needed to move further up the bus, who I needed to have with the microphone in their hand, who to put my energy into, because in a school you inherit staff and you have to work with the staff that you have. And I think that was something that I deliberately did that came from that book that I hadn't really thought about in any other or been exposed to in other leadership stuff. And so I found that really helpful. And then really working at, okay, so I noticed initially that I had very small leadership. People were just happy to go for the ride. And so I needed to actually empower my staff to be leaders, really. And
wow, that's amazing. That's such a powerful metaphor for schools and staff who work in schools and basically your leadership team as well. That would be a really useful leadership exercise for any principal in any school, I imagine. And and just I love that visual nature of it as well, which doesn't surprise me that you did it in that way either.
You become complacent if you don't, or you don't notice things. And wouldn't it be great to have the whole bus full of the whole bus to be deciding where we're going and what we're doing? And I think when I first started at the school,
that's awesome.
But I couldn't do that at the beginning. I didn't have the right people there and the right culture around it. Whereas now I feel like we have most of the people on the bus in the right way and want to be there and in what we do.
Awesome. And is that still a visual that you revisit as well? Like even now, as being 11 years into great.
I never shared it with anyone. It's there.
Yeah.
And it's not saved on the school's network. It's not saved on my school computer.
Of course, okay.
And I have it there. And now I use it as a bit of a celebration tool, but initially it was a bit of what's our next level of work? Yeah. What was the third thing?
Yeah.
The third thing was about leadership. So Jim Collins bangs on about the 5 leaders. And so they're people who I don't know, what's the best way to explain that? They're committed to their workplace, and they're people who are prepared to develop leaders school, really, and who don't see them and who are prepared to surround themselves by people who are different to themselves. So in addition to Good to Great, I read another book which was something along the lines of something about putting your strengths at work. Go put your strengths at work. I think it was by Marcus Buckingham. Go put your strengths at work. So and it's interesting because when you do 360-degree leadership surveys and things like that, all the data comes back, and of course they're very polite and they celebrate your strengths, and then they focus on your weaknesses. And this book by Buckingham suggested, which was mentioned, I think, in Good for Great, this book actually suggests focusing on your strengths and not, and if you put all the time and energy that you put into addressing your weaknesses, you can actually, if you put that in strengths, you're going to thrive. But you can only do that if you surround yourself with people that you trust, who are very different to yourself, that you're prepared to. And that's what Collins talks about in his book. So it's about being prepared to have people who are different to you around you, and being prepared to be challenged by them, being prepared to not always be right, and being prepared and having a culture where I think it's that Brene Brown rumble culture, where you're prepared to really hassle something through to get to a good solution, the best solution for the kids. So that would be the
great.
other
That's awesome. Yeah, awesome. I love those. I love those 3 concepts that you've mentioned, from good to great. So I love that, pick that one thing that you want to do and do it well. I think what happens is we have so many competing priorities in a school, and then it's just really hard to kind of just choose that one thing that we will choose, that we are going to do and we're going to commit to, and we're going to do that one thing really, really, really well. And so it's in Good to Great, Jim Collins, he kind of uses the metaphor of the hedgehog. It's, a hedgehog is really good at doing one thing. It can, can curl itself into a ball to protect itself. And so, when leaders, I think, when I've worked at schools where leaders have a really strong vision of what their school is, they're like, okay, well, we're committing to media, we're committing to education for girls. So it's just that one thing. And it kind of helps you as a teacher and as a, a middle leader as well, kind of sift through all of the stuff that's thrown at you in education. So that's really important. But I really do love that bus metaphor that visual that you kind of painted for us as well. And I think that would be a really good exercise, even though I'm not a principal in a school, but maybe just thinking about when I am a principal, if I make it to being a principal, just kind of doing that as a little kind of leadership activity for myself as well.
Well, you can do it on your own.
Awesome. Thank you.
You could do it on your own. So you don't have to be a principal of a school. So if you're a faculty leader or it doesn't really matter. Even if you're a staff member, you can look at it and go, what everybody is and what they do. And that's a really good exercise.
I love that. Thank you. Okay, Michelle, let's get practical with my 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 protocol. So I've already given you a heads up that I was going to ask you these questions. So hopefully you've had a think. So first thing, 5 things in your office/desk/work bag that are crucial to doing your job.
Oof. Really boring things, Jen. I have to say, my phone, crucial. My computer,
Yeah.
crucial.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whiteboard. I
Yeah.
have a big whiteboard in my office, and it gets drawn upon
Yeah.
in group thinks. And the phone is
Yeah.
needed to take photos of it because people worry about
Yeah.
getting it lost. My
Yeah.
bike sits in my office, so it's crucial to me being a
Ah.
principal. But I think that will
Yeah.
relate to something a bit later on. And I've actually
Yeah.
put not the office location has been important. So I used to be stuck away in the back area where the principal's office was originally built. And when we managed to rebuild, I've now got this little office right in the centre. So every day I get to see everyone walks past my office. And there's windows. So everyone.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and so my
That's
door goes.
fascinating. And that reminds me of there are some American principals who they actually don't have a room, an office with a door. They have like these roving trolleys that has their computer and everything on it, their mobile
Really?
phone and everything they need, and they just roam the hallways. Yes, they roam the hallways because they're wholly committed to that idea that principals need to be visible and need to be accessible at all times, not only to their staff but also their kids. So, if you want to take that one step further, maybe, think about getting a little trolley and just walking around the school grounds. There's yes, I think it was TikTok that I might have seen it on. So there's there's this principal that just, does TikToks about, what it's like to roam his hallways on a trolley.
Oh, that's hilarious.
That's so funny. I love it. Okay, 4. So we did 5, now 4. What are 4 daily practices that make you a leader?
Well, you might remember the first one. So first thing in the morning, I go to the staff room and I say hello to everyone. And I have little chats. People are up for a chat, but if they are keen to do their work, I just leave them to do that. So that's the first thing I do every single day.
Yeah.
And then I walk around the school saying hello to the kids. So that's in the morning or it could be in the afternoon. It could be at lunchtime or recess. But I actually walk around at one of those times when people are moving between classes. Hello, good morning. Hello, how are you? Sometimes I have a chat with someone. Tell me about this, or what was your weekend like, or how'd you go at the netball comp that I knew you were going to be competing in, or the tryout. So that's the other practice that I try and do every single day. Sometimes I don't always manage, but I try every day.
Yeah, that's great because classroom teachers do that all the time. So it's kind of like, you obviously don't have a classroom to go into, but you as a classroom teacher, you have to read the room from the first moment when your kids are walking in. So you're kind of taking the pulse of your staff and your students first thing in the morning. Yep, that's terrific. I love it.
I do have a classroom to go into.
Go
this
ahead.
Is the first I haven't taught. Yeah.
Oh, are you teaching? Oh, I didn't realise. That's exciting.
Yeah, no, I've kept that up.
That's awesome.
In class. And it's usually like a year 7 or a year 8 or 9 or 10 or something. But yeah, just
Is it an English class?
Sometimes it's English. Last year, because I thought I was taking leave, I actually ended up doing replacement classes when people were on leave. And I didn't like that as much because I like having my own class. I know you would understand that. But yeah, and I've been on leave this term, so when I go back, no doubt I'll have something.
Yeah. So I love that. I love it when I know that a lot of kind of principals kind of aspire to teach a class, and then something happens, and then they don't end up teaching a class. But I think if I do manage to make it to the principal level, I feel like you need to like once you've been out of the classroom for a couple of years, it's like you forget what it's like, don't you? But so going into a class every day, even if it's just like just once or twice a week or something, I think it just kind of keeps you in touch with teaching and the kids and all that kind of thing as well. I just love that you do that. And of course you do that because I admire you. And I always have. That's terrific.
It's the cycle that's important to remember. So, as a principal, you can easily get caught up in your own cycle, which is very different. The needs of a principal, the workload of a principal is very different to the workload of a teacher cycle. And sometimes you can forget where the teachers are in that, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
So that was 2, 3. Oh, no, so that was walking around
That was
saying
2.
latest.
Okay, 3.
I check in with my team. So I have a leadership team and I check in with them. So I have a slightly longer conversation with them. So I don't, not every one of them every day, but over the course of the week, I will have had a decent conversation with each of them. And probably multiple actually, but I actually deliberately walk to their office to have that conversation and to see what's coming up for their day and if I need to help them or be the source of blame or the source of the question them or whatever, yeah. And then the other thing I have to do as a leader is I have to deal with my mail every day, and I think every principal will have different ways of dealing with that. And there are a whole bunch of different theories on how to, and I tried a whole bunch, but I try and get rid of emails each day. So the emails that come in, I try and address them every day so that I don't get behind. And that means sometimes I just read the heading and delete, or I just say, I shouldn't delete, but I save it somewhere where I can actually come back to it if I need to. And you could, as a principal, sit there all day answering emails. So being quite thoughtful about how you do that, I think, is important. But that might change depending on where you are in your principalship and what the school culture is and what the school needs are. So that for me change over time. But I also have that time where the mail, I don't look at it. So I used to try and be the very best principal I could be, and then I'd read my mail at 11 o'clock at night, and then I'd be upset and not able to sleep or that type of thing. So I've had to deal with the mail and then turn it off and deal with it the next day. Yeah.
Okay, so that's the strategy that works for you, kind of dealing with it at a certain period of time, and then kind of, and then putting it away.
Yeah, yes, and I have to be really
because
quick
I know,
it.
because I mean, I know as like a classroom teacher or kind of like a middle leader, you get tons of emails, like you could take a day off or, a couple of days off, and then all of a sudden there's 83 emails or something you need to deal with. And I think principals, you would probably get a lot more than what a regular classroom teacher would get as well. So, and that's really interesting to hear you talk about, you've read theories on how to deal with emails, because I've heard, some people, it's not the first thing they do in the morning. So they leave it until 10 o'clock in the morning or something like that. Or, doing them for a certain period of time and then switching them off. So did you manage to find any of those strategies worked for you, or is it just have to do them at a period of time and then move away from them?
No, I come to them at certain times in the day, and each day will be dependent on what I have on. But I have I might see them first thing in the morning, but I might go and do my rounds first and then sit at them. But because people will want, they contact you, so they want to know that you've heard it, or seen it, or understand it, or are thinking about it. And then I come back to it in the middle of the day sometime, and then I come back to it at the end of the day. But I do have to do catch-up emails at certain times, so where I just sit there and I have to just work through the emails. And if it stays in my email inbox, then I have to deal with it. So it's still something to deal with. So I know. But you're right.
Yeah. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do the same thing. So I basically, if it doesn't apply to me at all and I don't need to respond, I just click archive. So I'm not deleting it, so I can still kind of find it if I need to find it. But and then I just leave whatever's there and that I have to deal with at some point in time. That's really, so it doesn't surprise me that your 4 daily practices involve communicating. So every single one of those was communicating and, checking in with people in a variety of different ways. That's awesome. So, all right, so 5, 4, now 3. So we know that being a principal is it's really hard work. It's a really demanding job, and we know that principals cop a lot of abuse and harassment in the job. Hopefully, you don't too much, but plenty of principals have had some really awful experiences, dealing with it in that kind of a job. But and we also know from research that there are some really serious concerns about principals' health and well-being, mental health in particular. I kind of, when I talk to people about maybe why I want to be a principal, sometimes they say, well, why would you want to do that? Because we know principals kind of shorten their lifespan from the research that we've done on them, because the job is just so stressful and so taxing and so demanding. But you obviously do it for a reason, and you're able to look after your health and well-being to a certain extent. So what are 3 ways that you can look after yourself, Michelle?
Well, I like to preface that I don't think I looked after myself very well when I first started as a principal. So I think it's something you have to learn to do. And there is a huge difference between a principal and a principal level. So, but things that I've learnt is that I have to, for me personally, and not everybody's like this, but I have to exercise. So if I exercise, I'm in a much better headspace, because when I exercise, I process my emotions. And that's the one thing you have to be able to do as a principal. You have to understand your own foibles. You have to understand your own triggers, your childhood things that surface. And so I think during exercise, and I tend to do repetitive sort of, like I swim or I ride a bike or I run. So they're repetitive things. So there's a bit of meditation in that, I suppose, but it allows me time to process stuff. And so I have conversations that I'd like to have with people when I do that, and then I try and work out the good way to have that conversation, so to speak. So that's one thing, is exercise. And I cannot, not everybody's an exercise person, but even then I think if you were to be out walking, something where you're actually in nature doing something is really important. The second thing is principals don't get time in lieu. And this is a bit cheeky, this one, but it's true. So we don't get time in lieu. So, and we probably couldn't, because if we did, we'd have, semesters off. But But we were told to manage our own time. So in my principal team, we encourage one another to manage our time. And how we do that is we talk about it together, and then we actively encourage each other to do that. And, people who are in leadership positions are notoriously bad at doing that. But where if you listen and trust the people, and the long term of you doing that, even if it's simply something like staying at home in the morning to write the things that you need to write so you're not interrupted, and you get 5 times the amount of work done that you need to do, or whether that means coming in late because you had a very late night last night and you just need some chills time so that you're your best possible self to be at work. So managing your own time is one. It's hard to have just 3 things, but I suppose it would be...
I know, yeah.
Surrounding yourself, if you can, as a principal, with a leadership team that is loyal and prepared to challenge you, that you can trust implicitly, is like heaven. And when you have that team around you, you are looking after yourself. They're looking after you and you're looking after them. It's a little family. So I think that's pretty special. And
do you think lots of principals have that, or is your situation unusual with your leadership team?
I think No, I think principals do surround themselves with people when they can. Often initially I inherited a leadership team, and then trying to find those people was, I had to find them. And then now I've built my own leadership team. But I think principals do that. The danger with principals, though, I think with people in general, is to surround ourselves like people that are like ourselves. But as the book Good to Great talks about, is
That's
you need
not
to
the best thing to do.
by people. Yeah. And so, both of my APs are similar or different to me, and my, my business manager, they're all similar and different. And sometimes their differences get right up my nose, but I also know they're probably right, and I really need to listen.
All right, number 2. So we have a really full-on teacher shortage at the moment. It's really hard to fully staff schools at the moment. If you are a principal, there's thousands of jobs on Recruitment Online at the moment. That's the portal that we use to advertise and recruit people in the state system in Victoria. And we have a principal shortage too. So, principal jobs that used to attract a really high number of APs or, experienced leaders, and, it was a really competitive thing. Sometimes they can't get some decent applicants or any applicants for the job. So 2 reasons that because I'm still on the fence about this, that I or other aspiring leaders should become a principal. Why do it? Only 2.
Well, we need more women leaders in the first place, I'd argue.
Yeah.
And there's still disproportionate number of women leading teachers versus assistant principals and principals. And I understand that because I've sat in that leading teacher space for a long period of time, because I had family and I was the primary care at home, but I do think we need to actively encourage more women to be leaders and nurture them to be leaders and help them to understand how they can be primary carers, but also to be able
to do both.
Yeah. So that's probably not a reason, but I do think more women need to be in leadership. I think you get to a point where you want to challenge yourself and you feel you can make a difference. And so if you feel like you can make a difference and you want to be challenged and you want to keep on growing, then it's one way of doing that. There are lots of ways of doing it. And there are times in your life where you might choose a different path and then perhaps come back to that path. But I think it's a really great job. It's to have the ability to influence a culture and be really, and to, support other adults to have, and you yourself to have an impact on young people's lives. And I know you can do that as a teacher, but you shape that culture a lot more. You shape your culture in your classroom, teacher, but to shape the whole school's culture. And, it's exciting. I can go from cleaning up puke to deciding on colours of walls to budget stuff to, communicating, running professional learning on well-being. It's actually a really interesting job. And as the principal, you do have your head around all of those things, and it's exciting. It's good. Why wouldn't you do it?
That's awesome. I love that. I love that you were talking about how we need more women leaders, and you and I could probably talk for hours about this. And the need. We need women to be actively developed to take on these leadership roles, and to be able to do both, to care for a family, but then also, lead in your school. Women are capable of doing both. We just need a system set up to enable that, I suppose. And then I love that you talked about, it's a way of challenging yourself, because, something that Steve and my husband and I talk about is that, when things are scary or, when you get nervous about something, it's actually really important to listen to that and do it, because it's important. to you, and it's important to do scary things to develop and grow. And as a classroom teacher, if you did a poll of all the teachers in the world, most of them would probably say that, learning, they want to be lifelong learners, and they want to develop that in their students as well. So cool. I love those reasons. Maybe I'm less on the fence now than I was at the start.
I think
so now, yeah.
I think the challenge in there, Jem,
No,
is
you
that
go.
I feel like a lot of my women leaders want to already be established leaders and know they can do the job before they get into it. And, I have 2 or 3 sitting in my staff now who are at an assistant principal level and aren't assistant principals in other schools, and could be. But I see it's interesting to watch some people who, not necessarily my school, but in general, sometimes the boys will put up their hands a bit more readily, and good on them because they're confident.
There's that saying of looking at some key selection criteria, and a woman would look at that key selection criteria and say, oh no, I won't apply because I don't think I can do all of them. Whereas a man would look at the same key selection criteria and go, I could do some of them, I'm going to put my hat in the ring and go for it anyway. So it's kind of like that confidence between us. And I think that it's giving people the confidence to do that earlier would be good. Yeah, love it. All right, last question for you before we finish. So, and this is about a leadership quality. So, I worked with you. It was a long time ago, and we've stayed in contact since. But what I admired about you was that you were inspired. You were really, you were assistant principal. I love this idea of the principal being the lead learner in the school. So you are modeling for your staff. You're modeling for the kids what it is to learn, and then to share that learning with other people. And I remember you and I leading some professional development for English teachers around the 6+1 writing traits. I know that recently, you ran some professional development for your staff around setting up classroom norms. And I just love that you are a lead learner as principal. So that's a quality that I really admire in you. But I want to hear from you. What is one key leadership quality that you believe that you embody that allows you to do your job well? So if you could, whittle it down to one thing, which I know is really hard because you are multifaceted and you're amazing in many, many, many ways. But yeah, what's one key leadership quality?
I reckon it would be interesting to ask that of my staff, because they would all come up with different things. I think the one leadership quality that I've had to draw on the most, probably, and I think I agree with you, I think I'm a learner leader, so that's how I describe myself. But beyond that, I would say I've had to learn to be flexible. So come into a school and you think, oh, I'm going to come in and do this, this and this, and then you realise they're actually at a different stage in the, on the continuum, or suddenly everything's going pear-shaped and you have to change what you want to do, or you have a timeline that you want to introduce a program by, and then COVID hits. Or a staff member leaves, and they carry that knowledge, and you haven't prepared for them leaving, and so you have to go back to the beginning again. And I think learning to be really flexible has been advantageous for me in that role.
And so how do you remember to do that? Like how can I practically take that leadership quality on? I mean, I suppose I would do it as a classroom teacher. You know, I'm constantly flexible in my classroom, you know, thinking my kids are able to do something, or then, you know, they're not, having to rethink my unit plan, you know, all that kind of stuff. But so, I mean, how do you remember to be flexible? Because it would be so easy to go, no, here's what we're doing. Here's my timeline. We're going to do this, 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 and that's just the way it's happening. So, I mean, how is that something that you remember to do?
That's why you surround yourself by other people who remind you to be flexible.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you're stomping around in your office going, oh, why can't we just do blah, 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 they go, yeah, and, you know, when you're swimming up and down the block, or you're doing your exercise or something, you're reminded of that sort of stuff. And so they're all sort of interlinked. And I know being flexible doesn't sound very exciting, but I think it's the one thing that, you know, that I've had to draw on the most as a principal, like flexibility with budgets, flexibility with staffing, you know, in staffing changes from July through to February every year, every week something changes. So you just have to be resilient with that, but flexible enough to make the adaptations and to plan for them, actually.
Yeah. I love it. Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to just gobble up that leadership quality of flexibility, because remember, I'm absorbing all of this into my own being to become the ultimate principal. Thank you so much, Michelle, for being in my inaugural episode. Like I said, I couldn't have imagined doing this with anyone but you. So it meant like we had to reschedule this so many times because, you know, life things happen. You know, you've just become a grandma, all these exciting things, and, you know, school year started and I've started in a new school and all this kind of stuff. But I really couldn't have imagined doing this with anyone but you. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing with me and spending time developing me. I just love you, and I wish that you were in an inner city school in Melbourne and I would work for you again in a second.
That'd be fabulous. You will be fine. You will be a great principal, Jem. You'll make a great one. And I look forward to seeing you.
Thanks, Michelle.
All right, take care.